Welcome to the Great Debaters Contest, where we bring you the very best in the business of debate. I am Mariam Bishar, and today we have a regional powerhouse from Machakos, Tala High School, and they are facing off against the lovely ladies of Starehe Girls, and they are asking whether vernacular languages should be taught in schools.
The motion this week is vernacular languages should be taught in schools. Proposing the motion, Tala High School. Opposing the motion, Starehe Girls Center. Each contestant has 3 minutes to make their submissions. The audience also gets a chance to put their questions to each team. Each side will have an additional 1 minute to make a final statement. The judge's decision is final. The winning school will get an ICT chill-out zone with the widescreen TV, computers, webcams, and internet connection. The teacher from the winning school gets 100,000 shillings courtesy of Chase Bank. The winning students each get a tablet courtesy of Safaricom, a gift hamper from Unilever, and a gift hamper from mimi.co.ke. And together, they all win the title, The Great Debaters. May the best school win.
We begin with the first proposer. You have 3 minutes.
In the words of the late Nelson Mandela, he said that if you speak to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you speak to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. I'm Jason Jue for Tala High School. I'm proposing this motion mainly because a vernacular language is a language for a certain community. That's what we call vernacular. And this will enrich our cultural practices. And also, when we learn our vernacular, we also learn to correct the mistakes that are in our cultural practices. It is the best form of research, as researchers who go into the remote areas will be at better communication with the people so that they can get the information they need, especially historians who need to find out the history of a certain community. Statistics from the UN show that there are about 6,000 vernacular languages in the world, and each day 10 get extinct, mainly because they are not used. You see, we are using English, but English in most countries is a second language. Come to think of it, in German, when you go to German today, if you speak to them in English, they pretend they are not hearing, mainly because they are proud of their language. I can refer you back to international writers, renowned writers, as Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who writes in Kikuyu. Dr. Vincent Mulu wa Kituku writes in Kikamba, mainly because he's proud of his culture. And when he's proud, he says if an European wants to get the language, then he must translate the language to English. In most countries, if you all know, English is a second language. Why does it have to be in Africa? We negotiate or we start debating about this motion. I wonder if today we are going to go to training colleges, teachers who are trained to teach students in vernacular languages. Some of the renowned leaders of this country were taught in vernacular when they were in primary schools. Then why does it have to be a debate in Africa? Why does it have to be a debate in Kenya, seriously? Yet other people are doing it. Another thing, it will add job opportunities to the NGOs who need to talk to people in vernacular, because the NGOs are non-governmental organizations that need to talk to people in different parts. And when they do this, they must have to speak to old people in their vernacular. I can refer you back to the research again. That research has shown a child who is taught in his vernacular language tends to understand more, mainly because he's not struggling to get the concepts. Actually, the concepts are diffusing into the blood. If the concepts are diffusing, unlike a child who is struggling to learn English, and also you don't say that the child will strain as he grows up, because we don't learn English to be perfect. We just learn so that we can communicate with other people. Thank you very much.
First opposer, you have 3 minutes to open new case.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Zipporah Gakuo from Starehe Girls Center. And today, I strongly believe that us introducing the teaching of vernacular languages in our schools isn't the best policy for our education systems. First of all, a vernacular language is a language spoken by a group of people or in a particular area, and it is a language that is not written and it is not an official language. Let me clarify on that definition of the vernacular language. To start with, it hurts and fills my heart with so much sorrow whenever I remember the post-election violence that we had in 2007 in Kenya. And what was the basis of all this? A lot of lives were lost. There was a lot of damage of property. Do we even consider the scars that were left in some of our hearts due to this violence? Scars that have not been healed up to date. And all of this was as a result of tribalism. And imagine at that time we had not even incorporated the learning of vernacular languages in our school. What do you expect to happen if we incorporate the learning of vernacular languages in our school? A kid will know, knowing that the tribal differences will be so distinct. I am from this tribe, I am from this tribe. And thus, a kid will grow up knowing that we are not the same, we are not equal. No matter how much you're going to emphasize on the fact of equality, that is not going to be there. And so this is going to really diminish our national unity. Let us ask ourselves this question. Are there even enough teachers to help in the implementation of this policy? According to Kenya National Union of Teachers, Kenya currently requires approximately 80,000 additional teachers to help boost the education system in Kenya. And if you're going to incorporate the learning of vernacular languages in schools, this will mean that we'll have to employ more teachers, we'll have to train these teachers. And is our economy able at this time to sustain such costs? And remember, people, first things first. Vernacular languages. Did you all hear that? Did you all hear that? This is an effect of my mother tongue interference. If the little mother tongue that I've learned at home has such an immense effect on my language as per now, if the little mother tongue that my mom has taught me at home has such an immense effect at my eloquence in all the other English languages and all the other languages that I learn as per now, can you imagine the damage that could be done to my fluency and my eloquency if I had been taught this vernacular language in a classroom since I was a young kid? Do we all want this? Is this what all of us want to? Can you imagine of a nation whereby we cannot have someone speaking in fluent English? We cannot have someone speaking in fluent French. How are we going to communicate globally and internationally to other people? We need to go global. And I think that if you're going to introduce vernacular languages in Kenya or even in any other nations, it is not the best policy for the development of this country and even or for the other African states. Let us think and ponder about that carefully. Thank you.
Time now for cross-examinations. Proposers, you have the floor. You have 3 minutes.
You were talking about something about tribalism. These are the words by Professor Jogu. He said this: negative ethnicity is not brought about by language. It is brought about the evil in a person. Second, you talked about, you said something that you pronounced badly. Judges, how many of you know your languages correctly, your vernacular languages? Let me guess, many of you. And according to me, I have been when Machakos, and I heard the judges speak. And for a fact, the lady who is the judge speaks very wonderfully. And second of all, I want to take the example of the first lady. She's called Margaret Kenyatta. She is a true woman of the soil, per se. Her English is perfect. So when you start saying about pronunciation, it is actually invalid and vague. On to my first point. I don't even know why we're arguing, literally, because the language policy guidelines published in the sensational paper number 14 of 2012 of the Ministry of Education states that vernacular instruction should be used to the age of 8 in rural areas. This means that this thing is already there. What we're arguing about is just the degree of which it has been enacted. It has been shown by scientists that it is an advantage to a human being to know many languages. It helps the person intellectually, the person is much more better. And communication purposes. If I can communicate with you without any barriers, for example, the French communicate in French and yet we recognize them. Why can't I, a Kikuyu or a Kamba or a Kalenjin, communicate in my language without being discriminated? Last of all, we have all done the book of Akoko, The River and the Source. And it says this, and let me quote, "One cannot know where he's going if he doesn't know where he's coming from." Thank you.
We'll now hear a rebuttal from Starehe Girls. You have 3 minutes.
Greetings. My name is Susan Warriera from Starehe Girls, and I'm here to strongly oppose this motion. First and foremost, I think our proposers are getting this motion wrong because we're not saying that vernacular language, it should be used in teaching in all the subjects. We are saying it should be introduced as a language, not to be used as a media of teaching other languages. Then as far as I'm concerned, Germany is not a vernacular language. Germany is a country. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, you're claiming that Ngugi wa Thiong'o writes his books just in Kikuyu. Why is this? This is because we have refused to change. And it is said, if you refuse to change, change will change you. This is because we've limited ourselves. We don't want to change. We don't want to leave these vernacular languages. And that is why we keep on referring to those writers that they don't. They don't do that because of anything else, but it's because we've refused to change. You're claiming that speaking the language, vernacular languages, it's going to preserve our culture. I think this is wrong because as far as I'm concerned, language is only but a medium of communication. Speaking French doesn't mean that I'm going to adopt the French culture. Therefore, if there is need to conserve our culture, let us do this. Our parents should take this initiative. As students are growing, as their children are growing, let them take this opportunity to teach them the vernacular language instead of telling us that we should introduce it in the school curriculum. Talk of resistance. How many of us here are ready and willingly to be seated in a class and be taught a vernacular language? Thank you. There was no hands up. Therefore, that tells a lot. Tell me, it is very impossible to defend a language whose speakers don't like it anymore. All of us are going digital, and actually vernacular language is associated with being analog. None of us here wants to be associated with being analog. Therefore, we are fighting to go digital, and telling me to sit in a class, teach me my vernacular language, that is forcing me to be analog, of which none of us wants to go back to analog. We are all moving digital globally. Then this does food for thought. You have two people, Alan and Brian. Alan did French, German, Spanish, English, and Kiswahili. On the other hand, Brian did Kiswahili, English, Maasai, and Giriama. Of the two, you are an employer and you want to employ one of them. Who are you going to consider to employ in a multinational company? That's just food for thought. So people, let us not confine ourselves. Let us not be so rigid. Let us embrace this. Vernacular languages should not be introduced in our schools. Thank you.
A question to the proposers. How do you expect a person who's grown to be taught in, for example, Luo, to interact with someone who is taught using Kikuyu and he knows only Luo? How do you expect them to interact?
Question to the proposing team. Do you think by integrating vernacular language into the curriculum, it will square us back to our tribal backgrounds and to emphasize on their point and bring us back to ethnicity and tribalism? Thank you.
My question is, why wouldn't I employ Brian, who has learned Giriama and Maasai, whereas I can employ other people who already know those languages because they are diverse, whereas these people will earn my company more profit and they will actually bring more customers to my company. Thank you.
My question is to the opposer. Why does she say that learning vernacular languages makes us analog, yet there are CDs, applications, and other electronic means where you can learn this online? Isn't that digital?
Third proposer, you can respond to the questions.
Said that the time is changing very fast, that the big will not beat the small anymore, but it's the fast that will beat the slow. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very easy to wear a pair of slippers than to carpet the whole world. I want to respond to the question, the first question from that gentleman. You said, how will we interact? Learning of vernacular languages does not limit the learning of other languages. We only introduce vernacular language as a subject. It's not compulsory for you to use it. You only learn it besides any other lesson. You don't use chemistry to interact with other people. To the second question, there's something we call unity in diversity. Unity in diversity stands in the fact that there are so many tribes in Kenya. We have more than 60 tribes, but 42 languages. And so all these people learning a different language doesn't mean that they are against each other. It means that they are only trying to identify themselves with a particular culture that is found within a limited geographical area where they find themselves at that particular time. And therefore, your question beats logic. It doesn't make sense. My second proposal, you said that it limits employment, that it limits interaction. Don't you think that by saying the fact that actually you said that it will cost the government to train and to bring about the syllabus into the system, and don't you think that by training these teachers, by paying those professors to write these books in vernaculars, don't you think we are trying to create employment? Don't you think we are trying to reduce crime rates in our cities? Don't you think we are trying to be more economical rather than to let people just rest at home with their knowledge? And when it comes to the scientific research, tell me anything in science that was not done in Latin. Where do you get such complex word? If in any definition, you are all high school students, you went through Form 1. Tell me which definition, apart from maths, that was written in Greek, that gives you a definition without any origin in Latin word. None actually exists. And therefore, this language actually, it gives us the very essence of promoting scientific research. And finally, I would like to say that this one, it will be helping the people. There are so many people who are illiterate. Bibles have been written in Kikamba, Kikuyu, Kalenjin, Luo. Who will read those Bibles without the interaction of the vernacular language? With that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Third opposer, you have 3 minutes.
Africa as a continent has always been fighting against tribalism. And I've actually seen one individual, one African who is promoting tribalism in this continent. Does it mean that by employing Brian, you're going to accept that you are a multinational company? Multinational is only going to consist of Giriamas, Maasais, Kalenjins. Don't you want also diversity of other nations and other communities? Thank you. The second point about analog and digital. These vernacular languages have been there in the past and they have not worked. Look at a country like Kenya. When my fellow opposers said about the analog and digital, it means that analog are some of the things that we've been doing in the past. They have not worked for us, and we need change. And if we don't change, change is going to change us. That is what analog is. These vernacular languages have always been there. They have not helped us. They've increased shedding of blood in countries, developing countries like Kenya, like Nigeria. Africa, you still want to shed more blood? You still want to see more people dying? Are you really human Africans? It's high time I have to change your mentality. And it's until I become the president of this country and also create into awareness in your heads that we need to change the mentality that we have towards our people. And then one of the proposers of this motion asked what the government is going to do and also employ more teachers to teach these languages. Kenya as a country is facing a crisis because it needs 80,000 teachers to get into schools and help the students. Yet you're talking about introduction or employment of more teachers. Is Kenyan economy enough to support all these teachers in schools? Kenya is already suffering an economic crisis. Our budget reads 1.8 trillion, and you still want to add more money, yet there is no money enough to facilitate the teachers who are teaching the current lessons in schools. It's high time we think about that. On to my first point. There is cumbersome syllabus in most of the schools in this continent and even worldwide, especially Kenya as a country, owing to the fact that these are Kenyans I'm speaking to. These are the future leaders I'm speaking to and I expect you to make change in this country. Kenya is facing a lot of trouble and cumbersomeness in the syllabus, and that is where commissions have been set to try to revise this syllabus. Now, you are revising the syllabus as a country, yet you want to introduce a more language, that is vernacular as a language as a subject in schools. Don't you think students in your schools and the people you call the future leaders need also to be relieved of the cumbersomeness of the syllabus? I think this is not the right Kenya. This is not the right Africa. Leaders, if these are the kind of leaders we are raising, and then teachers listening to me, it's high time you change on your teaching modes because your students are taking the wrong type of information. There is no way that you're talking about the reduction of cumbersomeness in the syllabus, yet you're adding one more language, a vernacular language, which will be a subject to these people. Africa, please change for the benefit of those who need to benefit from you. Thank you.
Final arguments now from both teams. We begin with the proposers.
Thank you. It's quite ironical, rather satirical, that the opposers are talking about digital, yet there's a version of Google in Kiswahili. Kiswahili is a vernacular for the Waswahili people. That is a digital form. Secondly, what my opposers do not get is that when Vasco da Gama came to Africa, he had to learn our vernacular in order to teach the Bible, and he was a missionary. If he had to afford to do that, who are we? That's the question you should be asking. Thirdly, my fellow proposer never insisted. You asked about Brian, who has learned Spanish and German, yet there's Omondi, who has learned Kikuyu and Kamba. It depends where the person is working. If the person is working in Kikuyu land, you will not bring Spanish. Obviously, they will not get. Your company will never prosper. Come on, let's beat logic over here. And I'm very frustrated that someone is talking about tribalism. The hearts of men are the ones that are evil. We found language here, and language is here to prevail. So you cannot change anything about it. Only change your perspectives of how you think. It's unity in diversity. That's why I propose this motion. Thank you.
Opposing team, give us your final statement.
Now, when we talked about Alan and Brian working in a company, we talked about a multinational company. I didn't talk about a tribal company. Please be aware of that. I talked about a multinational company where we want to incorporate people who speak different languages in this company. I didn't speak of only Giriamas going to work in this company. 2, Vasco da Gama had to learn the language of Africans so that he can try to communicate with them. Do you know the reason as to why this happens? It's because the vernacular languages were prevailing in our country. And the only way that he communicates with us is by learning this language. But suppose Vasco da Gama was alive to date, he would have learned the international language, that is English, so that he will not only communicate to Kenya as a country, but also to other countries. 3, Kiswahili becoming a vernacular language. I've not advocated, neither has my fellow opposers advocated for Kiswahili to become a national and international language. In short, we are advocating that we introduce an international language which is already introduced as English, which will be used by all people, not Kiswahili. Thank you.
Tala High, again, a great debate from the 3 boys up there, or the 3 gentlemen up there. Jesse, you are a good debater, and I think I love your sense of humor. I can listen to you for a very long time. I love the quote by Nelson Mandela, Kalima, a great debater also. Just work on your grammar just a little. We don't say much more better. We say much better. Okay? And then we say lastly and not last of all. So just a few grammatical errors. But again, a very interesting debater up there. Laban, you're cool, calm, and collected, and you're articulate. I just love the way that you present your facts very quietly, but very powerful. I think if you had told the audience here that this is how it can actually be done, then you'd have either scored better or convinced us better, with regards to this motion. But a good performance from the two schools.
Starehe Girls, Zipporah, you're a good speaker, great use of analogies. However, when you referred to the post-election violence, you talked about vernacular languages having contributed to that. And we know very well that vernacular languages have not been officially inculcated in the curricula of schools. So the question would have been, which I thought the Tala boys would have picked from that side. You should have cross-examined that point and ask, where are we teaching this? So that now you could have some extra points to gain. Susan, good cross-examination. You understood your role very well. Evelyn, you're a good speaker. However, you make some points that I had to fill up for myself because you speak relatively fast and you're able to deliver very fast as well. When you come back as a last speaker, concentrate on giving us your team summation. Don't cross-examine at that time. You have already had time for that. So when you come in, convince us like Tala boys did, so that now we are left remembering your contribution and your stand in the motion. However, you did fairly well, and all the best to the two teams.
Njue, good debater. I don't need to say much. Your arguments are very, very intelligent, the way you raise it up. Abaz, also current, very current. I think there's a policy that possibly still debated whether we should introduce languages up to a certain level in schools. And also that should have come from your team. If it should be taught in schools, up to what level? Coach, when you make an introduction, ensure that your introduction has a relevance to whatever thing you're going to say. There's an idea about sleepers. I could not really connect how it comes in the course of your debate. So ensure that you only say what is relevant and what will help you get points. Zipporah, it's good issues raised. Susan, it was good. Achaya, good. Nonetheless, when you talk, at some point you want to register an impact. And the best way to register an impact is always to take a pause in order for us to digest whatever thing you've said. You speak relatively fast. So at some point, if you find that you have a weighty issue to put across, you can just take a dramatic pause and then continue their presentation. Nonetheless, to the two teams, I think here I can say it was good. It was good, not really fairly good, because we saw a lot of issues being raised. But you could still do better, that is.
Thank you, judges. They gave the lovely ladies of Starehe 70.8. I think that's a very commendable effort. Give them a hand. And to the gentlemen who carried the day today, they got 71.5. Congratulations. As for vernacular languages, the decision has been made here today. For more debates like this, watch us next time. I am Mariam Bishar.
The winning school will get an ICT chill-out zone with the widescreen TV, computers, webcams, and internet connection. The teacher from the winning school gets 100,000 shillings courtesy of Chase Bank. The winning students each get a tablet courtesy of Safaricom, a gift hamper from Unilever, and a gift hamper from mimi.co.ke. And together, they all win the title, The Great Debaters. May the best school win.